President Obama this morning is hosting world leaders from over 50 countries for this year's NATO summit. The top issue on their agenda out in Chicago is Afghanistan. To talk about all that and some of the other foreign policy issues, our friend Tom Friedman, columnist for the New York Times, correspondent Clarissa Ward, who spends most of her time in the Middle East but is here with us today in Washington. She's just back from Afghanistan. Senator Graham, of course, is on the Armed Services Committee and rejoins us from South Carolina. Senator Graham, before we get into all of that, I want to ask you first about something that is, just happened last night, I guess. Chinese dissident Cheng Guangcheng arrived in New York, where he is going to attend law school. We all know this dramatic story of how he escaped house arrest, wound up at the American embassy, and then finally got back. What do you make of this? I just want to get your reaction. What do you think this means?
Well, one, I'm glad he was out of China, but I think what this is an opportunity for the American government and people to re-engage China about their human rights records. This guy had a dramatic escape from a hospital. His family has been treated like dirt for years because he objects to forced sterilization and forced abortions by the Chinese government. We have an intricate, very close relationship with China economically. It has drowned out our moral voice, and this opportunity exists through this brave man to raise our moral voice and tell China, we want to do business with you, but you better change your behavior because you're an outlier in the world based on what Mr. Chen is objecting to.
Tom, this all happened when the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, was in China. It seemed to me that as difficult as it was, that the Chinese were probably as anxious as we were to try to figure something out here. Am I wrong about that?
Yeah, what really comes through in the story, Bob, is how much the Chinese wanted to play this down, not make a symbolic issue about it. I think there are a couple of things going on there. One is they've got their own internal turmoil at a very high level with this leader from out west, Bo Xilai, who has been found knee-deep in corruption, and his wife potentially implicated in a murder. I think you're seeing something else going on, too. The fact that the Chinese didn't even want the information released for a while early on in this crisis, I think tells you something about the massive spread of microblogging in China and the fear of the leadership that this would create a nationalist populist firestorm and constrict their room for maneuvers. You got a lot of new factors now at play in this relationship.
Clarissa, we were also proud of you when you managed to sneak into Syria when things there were at their worst. You just got in there undercover. You reported from the scene when other people were reporting from across the border and other places, and it was just a remarkable series of reports.
Thank
but since then, under the old "What have you done for us lately?" Since then, you're just back from Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
That's the topic number one in Chicago, where all these leaders are meeting with President Obama. What is the state of Afghanistan right now? What did you find when you were there?
Well, obviously it's a very complex picture, but there's certainly a very real concern for many people living there about this set deadline for a troop withdrawal. And I spoke with one very important and interesting Pakistani writer, Ahmed Rashid, who argued quite persuasively, I think, that it is absolutely essential for some type of a peace agreement already to be in place between the Taliban and the Karzai government before we can really pull back those forces. Because if those forces pull back and we're plunged into a civil war, the Karzai's fledgling security forces have absolutely no chance of winning any kind of a victory in a battle between the Taliban and Karzai's government. So it is important to engage the Taliban. And certainly, I also met recently in Pakistan with members of the Taliban, and there is a sense that possibly certain factions of the older generation are growing more politically savvy. They understand that they can't go in and make a complete grab for power, that this will have to be some kind of a unity government. There has to be some kind of a sharing agreement, otherwise the aid stops, and they don't want to be international pariahs in the way that they were in the 1990s. But of course the question then is, to what extent is the Taliban a homogenous group, and how can we trust them?
So are we set up for this to end the right way, Senator Graham?
Yes, possibly. The Strategic Partnership Agreement, where we commit to have a counterterrorism force past 2014, closes the deal, in my view, on the Taliban's aspirations to come back militarily. The Afghan security forces are getting better. They're better trained, they're better equipped. 2 years ago, for every Afghan soldier in the south around Kandahar, there were 2 Americans. Today, there are 2 Afghans for every 1 American. Focus on building the Army and the police. Let the Taliban know that we will have a force past 2014. The British agreed to stay today past 2014. My view is, with about 3 or 4 air bases, 20,000 troops left behind past 2014 with American air power and special forces units, the Afghan army will always win a fight with the Taliban. And if you want the Taliban to reconcile and accept the Constitution and stop killing women in soccer stadiums, they have to believe that you can beat them militarily, and I think we're on track to be able to do that.
You think so, Tom?
Well, I have a slightly different view than Senator Graham, which he knows. I believe from the beginning we have 4 choices in Afghanistan, Bob. Lose early, lose late, lose big, or lose small. And my hope was that we would lose small and early. I have felt from the beginning of this whole surge that the surge of President Obama could work if 3 things happened. Karzai became a different man, Pakistan became a different country, and President Obama succeeded in doing in Afghanistan precisely what he said he wasn't doing, nation building in Afghanistan. So, whenever I hear people saying it's a training problem, I always ask myself, who is training the Taliban? Training Afghans to shoot, to fight, that always just has a real dissonance in my ear. I think people fight when they have a will, and it's not just about the way. And I think there are a lot of Afghans that don't want to fight for a corrupt government, all right? That's one problem. And the other problem is Pakistan, which has been playing a double game there, giving sanctuary to the Taliban, same time, being our ally on the other side. Until Pakistan stops looking at Afghanistan as strategic depth against India and start understanding that its strategic depth is its public schools, the quality of its government, I don't see how any of this has a happy ending.
Clarissa?
I'm inclined to agree absolutely with Tom. I mean, Pakistan has to confront its very real internal economic and political problems. And until that starts to happen, it's impossible to see how there can be any kind of lasting peace in Afghanistan.
So is what happens in Afghanistan, Senator Graham, we went there because it posed, we were told, a threat to our security. And in fact, I think it did. Does it still pose a threat to our security, and has what we have done there and the time we have spent there made us any safer?
Well, what makes us safe? Is it killing bin Laden? That helps. What makes us safe is providing capacity to will. And I like Tom Friedman, and your reporter is one of the bravest on the planet, but I couldn't disagree more. The Afghan people reject the Taliban in large numbers. Their military and police forces are getting better in the eyes of the Afghan people. The Taliban are never going to give up the fight until they believe they will lose. Pakistan needs to believe that we're not leaving Afghanistan and the Taliban can't come back. They're betting on the Taliban coming back. You can't lose a little bit in Afghanistan. Either you win or you lose. And my belief is if we'll stick to it and follow General Allen's plan, who I trust better than anybody on this show or anywhere in the world, that we're going to leave Afghanistan, but we'll have a military force left behind that will allow us to defeat the Taliban in perpetuity. And you're dead right about the Karzai government. It's corrupt to the core, but here's what you don't get. I've been there about a dozen times. There are a generation of Afghans who want a better country, who are going to be less corrupt, and they're going to come to power one day, but you'll never have a transition of corruption to good governance without security. So these young people who are risking their lives and dying in droves to change Afghanistan, if we stick with them, there will be a brighter future in Afghanistan, and we cannot leave Afghanistan without our national security being affected one way or the other. What happens in Afghanistan will follow this country for decades. I applaud the President for a strategic partnership agreement. NATO needs to fund the Army. NATO nations needs to commit past 2014. If we'll do that, we will get this right.
Let's talk about another real problem, and that's something you know a lot about, Clarissa, because you've spent so much time there, and that is Syria. Where are we right now? There's a, quote, ceasefire in place, but there's no ceasefire.
Absolutely. There's no ceasefire. None of the points of Kofi Annan's peace plan have been met. There are still tanks and troops in civilian areas. People are not able to protest without being fired on, as we saw in Aleppo. Students coming out to protest were met with bullets instead. So there's a very real sense that this peace plan is not going according to plan. And the question is, at what point does the international community call this plan a failure? And if they do call it a failure, what's the next step? Because unfortunately, what's happening in the interim, while there's this kind of inertia, is you're seeing extremist non-state actors who are stepping in to capitalize on the political chaos in the country. And I speak with these opposition activists every day, and they're up in arms about it. They say, of course, we have nothing to do with these bombings, and we're horrified that they're happening, and they're giving our movement a bad name. But they're certainly not in any position to put a stop to them either.
Tom, what is the next step?
Well, we're seeing, Bob, if you from 30,000 feet, we're seeing the breakdown of a 100-year-old order, basically, in this region. Sunni-led Iraq has been reversed now. It's Shia-led Iraq. Alawite-led Syria, that's being reversed to bring the Sunni majority in. Christian-led Lebanon. It's all part of a broad arc of basically an old order crumbling. And the reason Iraq has a 1 in 10 chance today of some kind of decent outcome, it's for, I would say, 2 reasons. One is that you did have a upsurge of Iraqis there who really wanted to claim the future. But the other is we were there. We were there as a midwife. We took Iraq from Saddam toward Jefferson without getting stuck in Khomeini, okay? Now there's going to be no midwife in Syria. So you're going to see the same kind of sectarian volcano erupt with no midwife. The United States isn't going to do it, Europe's going to do it. So look, all we can do, I think, is identify the decent actors, hold them to high principles, try to push them in the right direction, work with the Russians. The game is over. Do we intervene? The Syrians have decided they want to take this guy out, all right? We've got to identify the better angels in that group, try to align with them and tilt them in the right direction. We can't do it alone, we shouldn't do it alone, but I don't see any other option.
Senator Graham, is there anything we can do here?
Yeah, we can do a lot. We can back up the idea that Assad's got to go. We need to tell the UN your plan's not working. Come up with a better plan. We can help arm the rebels. We can make it a better, fair fight. We don't need to do this unilaterally. But what's going on in Syria is the same thing that went on in Tunisia, Egypt, and China, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Young people are now experiencing the ability to talk to themselves. They're sick and tired of living in countries that are corrupt to the core. And the Arab Spring has many forms to it. And the question for us, what is the Arab Spring and what role should we play in it? Every country is different, but I would like to see more involvement in terms of safe haven for the rebel forces, a stronger effort to arm them militarily, and to try to find out a working relationship with the Syrians. It's a very complicated environment, but if you break Assad off and you get him out of power, it's the biggest blow to Iran in 25 years, according to General Mathis. The Iranians are watching us. If we leave Afghanistan like we did Iraq and it begins to fall apart, why should they think we will do anything to their nuclear program? If we can't take Assad down after we said we would, they're going to think we're not really serious about them. So the Iranians are watching us, Bob, and if I were the President of the United States, I would put a full court press on to make sure Assad goes sooner rather than later.
Well, let me talk to Tom, because you mentioned the Arab Spring, and I know you're just back from Cairo. Give me your thoughts on what Senator Graham just said.
Back from actually Lebanon and Jordan and the UAE. But, yeah, I certainly think that what you're seeing today in the Arab Spring, and Senator Graham alluded to it, and I think at its core is what he said. It is an upsurge of Arab youth, seeing how everyone else is living in the world and understanding how far behind they were. And it was like a volcanic eruption. But here's what we see, I think, a year and a half later. That eruption was enough to blow the lid open, but not off. So in Egypt, the lid is still there. The army, part of the old regime, is still there. Into that opening came the most organized political party, the Muslim Brotherhood. And that's what you're seeing now play out in Egypt, the struggle between those democratic youth aspiring for a different future and this very old political movement. Now, what's missing in the Middle East that Europe had a model, the European Union. And everyone wanted to get in the European, and it was a huge magnet for them to do the right things. In the Middle East, the model you have is Islam. Okay, that's the model that's pulling them the other way. We need to be in there, I think, to the extent we can, with money, resources, an example at least, of trying to nurture them toward a different model.
All right, well, our time is up. Clarissa, thank you so much. Where are you going next?
Probably to Lebanon if the fighting continues there. It's trickling over from Syria now. So.
All right, we'll await your report.